All right, everybody. Hi there. How are you? Hope you're doing well. How is Global Hack Week treating you? Hi there, Camillo, Nithya, Swedev, and Elmgber. Good to see you. Thank you for joining for the stream. We're going to start today with some data visualizations in Taipy. Very exciting topic. It's going to teach you a little bit about this front end and back end framework called Taipy, allowing you to visualize your data stream, your data visualizations and analysis from your machine learning results. You all are learning so much about AI and its power, but part of this whole thing of data analysis and data science is being able to show others your work, and make it interactive, make it applicable. So for that reason, we need development environments and frameworks like Python, like Taipy. So I'm really excited to share this with all of you. And Toe says, just a question, should I be worried if I'm unable to make it to most of the live streams due to classes? I wouldn't be worried at all, Toe. It's totally okay to watch our pre-recorded lectures. You can watch those on Twitch or YouTube. YouTube, they'll be up for basically unlimited time. On Twitch, I think they stay around for about a couple months, and then that's it for our Twitch. But yeah, don't worry about making the live streams seriously, unless it might help you to stay on task and stay motivated. But it's totally okay to miss those, especially if you need to prioritize other things in your life. But I'm really grateful and thankful for all of you who were able to join here live. But yeah, so as the title says, we're going to share our digital data visualizations with Taipy, and this is part one. So we're actually going to go over more of the Taipy framework and really get started using that, building out our pipelines in Taipy and learning more about how the framework works. And then in our next part, we'll get into the weeds a little bit more about data visualization and actually being able to chart out some of our data and results of our machine learning. So that will be really exciting. But first, absolutely do not forget to check in. This is super important. It lets us know who's interested in our streams, what topics are folks most interested in. And yeah, please check that out. Yeah, and while you're checking in, I'll just let you know that by checking into the events, you're winning points in Global Hack Week. You can get swag sent to you. You can even get some bonus swag sent to you sometimes if you check into enough events or participate in enough challenges. In addition, you just help us figure out which content is most interesting to you folks. What are you engaged with? What do you want to learn? So all of this helps us out with checking in. And while you're checking in, I'll just introduce myself. So my name is Steven. I've been a coach with Major League Hacking for about 5 years now. It's been a really long time. And I'm super excited to be here with you today. But yeah, we're going to fill out a quick survey to get to know you a little bit better. And this is good for us to go through together, and also to just get a sense of where you are in data visualization and machine learning and Taipy. So go ahead and fill out that form. I'm going to give a few minutes for everybody in the audience to fill in that form. Let's read some of the comments. So Shrey says, hello, everyone. Hi there, Shrey. Good to see you. Thanks for joining for the stream. And Nguyen says, hi there. And Ron Axel says, cool. Let's start learning. Yeah, I'm with you. Data analytics and AI in research for bioinformatics and social good. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I think a lot of those topics are relevant to bioinformatics and social good. We have a lot of community members at Major League Hacking who are interested in using technology to improve their communities, improve society. I talk to a lot of folks actually in our community, especially through our fellowship program. A super common theme in our community is helping people out with our technical skills. So that's great. And your lack of skill says, do I need to have any experience beforehand? I think your Twitch name is great, super relevant to this question too. But the answer is no. There's no need for any kind of experience beforehand or knowledge. Really, we're going to go over all of the stuff you need to know during this workshop. If you know some Python, that'll be really helpful, but no experience is needed. And Nithya Shri says, I have done quite a bit of data visualization from Tableau and Power BI. Those are great to have. And then we're going to learn this Taipy, which is awesome. So, and anything I should have downloaded. So yes, download Visual Studio Code. So I'll put that in the chat. So this is just a normal development environment, and we'll go through this in detail of what you'll need to get set up. But before we get moving on, I want to check out the results of this form. So let me quickly open this up so we can all see together exactly what has been submitted here. All right. So I'm going to start sharing this tab instead, these survey results. So first question was, have you heard of data visualization? This could refer to charts, maps, or other forms of data online that you may have interacted with. And 100% of you said yes, which is awesome. And then, have you built a data visualization? We actually have super split down the middle, 50-50. That's super cool, actually. So we have some new folks and some veterans, but I think Taipy, a lot fewer of you have heard of. So hopefully that will still provide some learning benefit to you, even if you have already learned some of this before. And this is always my favorite question in the form. Global Hack Week is truly global. Just for fun, tell us which continent you're logging on from. And I bet a lot of you didn't realize that you were in an audience with people from every continent except for Antarctica hanging out in the chat. How cool is that, huh? And don't forget to check in. This is super important. So I put even another look at that down below. If you need the check-in link, it's available in chat. I'll post it right one more time for you to check that out. But yeah, this is really cool. So thank you all for participating in the survey. It's great because I get to actually hear a little bit more from you, and also feel like I'm actually speaking to other people. Sometimes when you're on Twitch, it can be hard to, because you're talking to your computer, even though I really am talking to so many of you, but it's easier for me to feel that way when I get some interaction. So Yoma says, I'm from Africa. Welcome from Africa. I think it's a little bit late over there in Africa, but glad you could join us. And Ron next is from Mexico. Penguins can also hack. Yes, absolutely. I wish some penguins would join for one of my streams. That would be really fun, don't you think? But yeah, so now let's move on a little bit. So before we get started with Taipy, we need to make sure that our development environment is appropriate. And so if you haven't already, I want you to go to visualstudio.com and download their code editor. It's available in Mac, Linux, and Apple distributions. So just go ahead and download whichever one is compatible with your computer. Let me post a link in the chat just so that everybody has this link, because having a good text editor is pretty much half the battle in software development. I'm not even kidding. Having your development environment set up in the right way will save you so much time. Even if you have an hour or two free time and you want to work on your programming a little bit, I mean, it's one thing to do another tutorial or to learn another skill, but it's another thing to really just dig into your environment and clean it up and make sure that everything is compatible, working together well. It can be huge to do that. Okay, so then I'm going to assume that you've got your Visual Studio Code open. And I'm going to go through this too live so that we're all kind of working together in the same way. So I just opened up a new Python environment in my Visual Studio Code. So let me pull up my Visual Studio Code actually. All right, there it is. And I'll separately pull up my slides actually so that we can look at both. But I'm going to give it a second for all of you to get your Visual Studio Code environments ready and get on Python, get a new Python environment going. Have you programmed in Python before in Visual Studio Code? If not, you might need to install the extension. You can go to the extensions store, which is this button right here, and you can go searching for Python. And you can download Python actually right into your Visual Studio Code. It will help you notice the syntax of Python and work with that language. You can also install Taipy Studio, which we'll talk about later, but this is how we're going to interact with Taipy and help us to get support for the Taipy GUI. So that's really important. All right, we have a question in the chat. Defendant 2511, what version of Python has to be from 3.8 to 3.11? And I recommend 3.8 to 3.10. I don't recommend 3.11 because some of the features have not been implemented in 3.11 yet. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. And SweetEv says, use Jupyter from Kaggle and have coded on VS Code. That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing about that. And it's good to have some folks in the chat who have some experience already, and some others who maybe are sort of newer to this whole thing. But we'll all get to the same place, right? That's the beauty of Global Hack Week, is we all learn something. So all right, so now we're gonna start programming, but before we do, I want to just go through a little bit more housekeeping here. So this is, like I said, you create a new file and you want to make a Python file, and then we need to do some things in the terminal. So we're going to check on our Python version. So let's switch back into our program here, and I have my base environment here. So I'm going to just check on my Python version by using Python _version. And let me shrink this a little bit so it's bigger in your screen. Sometimes people have a hard time seeing if it's so small. And you see I have Python 3.10.8, and that's going to be totally fine. I can also activate, I built a special environment for Taipy in my conda. You might need to type Python 3 -- version to get this to work. But in this Taipy environment, I have it at 3.9.6. So it's totally fine. Whichever one works for you. Anything from 3.8 to 3.11 should be fine. All right. So let's go back to our slides. What we need to do in the terminal next is install a few dependencies. So these are dependencies that we need for Taipy, and especially there's some functionality that allows you to work with large language models and other transformer models. So for those, you need to install these. You could either use pip or pip3. I'm not sure which one it's going to be for you. You're like, sorry, I missed what the first step was. It was to type Python _version, just to double check that your Python is working okay. All right, so hopefully your Python is working okay. And then we're going to install Torch and transformers. So I'm going to go back in here, and we can type pip3 install Torch. This is what we call PyTorch, one of the machine learning libraries provided in Python, where you don't need to get a lot of different things. And your Lexus says, I have 3.12. Is that fine? Actually, no. You need to have 3.8 to 3.11. So if you don't have one of those and you have Conda, you can use Conda create, and you can have a specific version of Python installed. So here, I'm going to paste a chat that will help you install Python in the correct version. You would just type in Conda space create space name equals, and then name your environment, whatever you'd like to, and then Python 3.9.5, just to give you a compatible version. And then once you have that environment created, you're going to activate it using conda activate. Okay, so if you have conda, this is super, super useful. If you don't have conda installed, I highly recommend that you install it. And you can do that on the following website. So I just sent you the website for conda, and feel free to download that onto your computer. It'll help you because you can have any version of Python in your environment. Some libraries are not updated with like super common frequency, especially smaller projects and smaller communities building software. It could take them a long time to update all of their methods, all of their code to the newest version of Python all the time. So definitely take advantage of that conda by getting exactly the version that you need. Ferris says, which libraries are we downloading from pip again? Great question. So you can download the following two libraries as dependencies for Taipy. And we actually won't use them today, but it's just good to have them because they are going to give you the full functionality of Taipy. And like I said, you could use pip or you could use pip3. It's really up to you. Noaf says, can I use PyCharm? Absolutely, you can use PyCharm. But I just think Visual Studio Code is my personal preference. So that's why I encourage everybody to try it out and see if they like it. But you're welcome to use PyCharm, especially if you're more comfortable with PyCharm or any other coded editor, really. If that's what you're comfortable with, then that's what you should use, right? So anyway, we're also going to install Taipy. And Taipy is the real meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this project. So go ahead and install that using the same pip command, pip install, but now replacing it with Taipy. All right, so someone's asking, what do I do now that I've installed conda? How do I get it on VS Code? Well, so you need to go into your terminal. I think I have that here, and you can type in conda, and it should pop up with the following commands. Just to tell you that your conda is installed. You can do conda version to find exactly what version of conda you have. But that's how you'll know that it was successful. All right, so you actually have to install it. So go ahead and install it first, add it to your path, and then you can use that. And yeah, Camilo is probably right. You probably do need to restart VS Code. So just also work on that. I wonder if there is an extension actually that you can use for conda. No, it doesn't seem like there's really any extension that would help you, but yeah. So anyway, we're gonna open our Python file again just to get that back. All right. Someone says I can't install Taipy. What you need to do is type in your terminal pip or pip3 install Taipy, and it should work. If it's not working, then you need to make sure that you're using Python versions 3.8 through 3.11. You can check your Python version by typing Python and then /version. But you definitely need to make sure that your version is compatible with Taipy, otherwise it will not load. And vTankstastic says, I'm sorry, but can you type the second installer? Absolutely. So the first install that we did was pip install torch. I'll put that in the chat too. And then the second one we did was pip install transformer, or sorry, transformers. So I'll put that in chat too. And the third one we did was pip install Taipy. And I'll put that in the chat also so that everybody has access to all three of these. And I'm also going to post my codes at the end so you can see for yourself everything written out. But for these environment sort of things, you just kind of have to troubleshoot it sometimes, go through the jigsaw puzzle of installing things, uninstalling things, upgrade this, check the environment for that. It can be super, super cumbersome. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, and I also mentioned you can install Taipy Studio. Of course, it's optional, but I recommend it because it's going to really help you when you're going through your GUI development. All right. This is an extension, so you can actually search for that in the extension store. You would just go to this button right here, extensions. Okay. All right. VTank Texas says, this is awesome. Heck yeah, I'm glad. We have some early enthusiasm. And I want to actually pause now because we've gone through all of this installation stuff. And I want to make sure that there's no questions. Is anybody still having issues with this issue? So when you type this code, your lack of skill, I want you to type conda create -- name, and then I want you to write MLH, not bracket MLH, and make sure you also put the Python version there. And Sweetev has a question. How would I install Conda on a Mac? That's a great version. That's a great question. And there's actually a answer to that. So you need to go to the installation page. I'll put a paste in there. And just select the Mac. And you can do a graphical installer. You can download that and it will walk you through installing Conda. Yeah. So if you're having trouble with installing Conda or mini Conda, I'm going to send you one last resource that you can try, and then we'll move on because we just need to make sure that the workshop goes at a good pace. But if you get lost or you need some help, just rewind. That would totally be fine. But let me send you these codes. So this is the codes. So go to the quick command line install section and just go ahead and follow the commands in your terminal, and it should install Conda for you. All right. And it looks like your lack of skill, it worked. Great. I'm so glad that it worked for you. And Sweet Dev, I hope that it works for you. Let me know if you're still having trouble. But we are going to move on in our workshop just so we can cover everything. So now I want to introduce you to some basic Taipy lingo, some language. Oh, Kyle, great. Thank you, Kyle. Hope you are able to figure that out. But yes, so first Taipy scenario is going to be what we accomplish in this next section. And a Taipy scenario is basically a series of nodes and tasks. So what you're going to do is have some input nodes where you can see some input nodes on the left here. Name, for example, could be an input node. It could come from a database, a user input, anything like that. And then we're going to pass it through a task, right? So the task can operate on this information that comes from the input node and any other nodes. And then it will output a return, right? And that return will go to another node, sort of this message end node here. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a way of understanding nodes. I mean, for example, and tasks, this could be a hello world. And in fact, we are going to build a hello world where you get a name from the user and build a message using that name to customize the message, and then send it out to the end node where it could be displayed on the website or anything like that. Okay. And I'm actually going to invite you all to think of your own scenario. I would really, I think it'd be kind of fun for us to try this, where we invent our own scenario where you could execute it in Taipy. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to type that into the browser and come up with a simple scenario of your own that you could think of to execute with Taipy. So we'll just take a couple of minutes to do this. But yeah, while we're waiting for everybody to fill out the form and give us some inspiration, how is everybody's Global Hack Week going so far? I think this is day 1. Is that right? So I guess you haven't done that many workshops yet or had that many late nights watching live streams. But yeah, how is everything going? Is anybody finishing up their schoolwork? Here at my university, we have about a month and a half left of school, 6 weeks that is, and then the quarter will be over. So it's sort of midterms right now, halfway through exams. All right, look at this. We have pretty informative so far, going well. I'm glad to hear it. Oh, what the heck? I just opened up something that I don't understand in StreamYard. Just some random stuff opened up on my screen. I hope you all didn't see that. Good, Kyle. I'm glad everything got downloaded. And then 2 says, my first hackathon. I'm unsure of what I'm doing right now. Just worried about missing live streams because of classwork. Yeah, but definitely focus on your classwork. That's the most important thing. And then if you miss a live stream, feel free to come back to it later. And then Kyle says second semester. Sandra says getting started for 2 weeks. Wow. So you're right at the beginning. That's my favorite part actually of classes, because you're not behind yet. Yeah, I always used to get behind in my work towards the end. Doing an MS in CS and DS. Wow, that sounds like a pretty demanding course load, but very impressive for that. Oh, sorry, your lack of skill is not Kyle. SweDev is Kyle. Sorry about that. Your lack of skill. I don't know, but anyway. So let's see if there's any scenarios yet. Oh, can you re-explain the last slide? Yes, of course. So basically, we're gonna think of web development through Taipy. We're gonna think of it in terms of nodes and tasks. So in React, you might have components, hooks, but in Taipy, this is how we are gonna design our application. Okay, so it's just part of that. Oh, already getting into code, my goodness. But yeah, let's go ahead and check this out. I'm super curious to see all of your responses. If you've come up with anything interesting, usually folks do come up with something interesting. And actually, we only have 2 responses, so I guess maybe people weren't that excited about this. The prospect of this assignment, but let me share them with you all, because I think they're kind of cool, the ones we did get. So we got maybe analyzing sentiment in social media. Yeah, you could do that. So you could have a node where you accept some social media post or some topic, some thread, and tasks that search through the data. Oh, sorry, I got to post this up. Search through the data, process it, and maybe an output node that tells the user what the sentiment is on that topic. So this would be a great example. And here's one that's a little more explicitly mapped out, which is great. A node could be a class project. Yep, you could accept class projects from the users. And then the task could do some research, some slide creation, do your project for you. That'd be great. And then, yeah, help you successfully complete that. So that's awesome. Well, thank you both for sending in those responses. And now we're actually going to move on to doing some programming and really getting deep into this Taipy stuff. So I have set up some pre-made code in these slides, but we're going to also go through this together. I'm not just going to bombard you with all of this. I actually should share with you the completed version of this code so that if you want to follow along on your own, you can. So here it is. I'm just going to paste it in the chat so anyone can see it. If you go to this link, it's not, I promise you, it's not anything, malicious. It's just a Python file that is going to have all this code in it, which is pretty boilerplate Taipy stuff. So if you ever get lost or you're worried about falling behind in the programming, just know that it's all there online. So you can check that out. Yeah, so I'm really going to focus on actually writing this up now. So why don't we do that together? I have in my Visual Studio Code some space. So why don't we go ahead and put this all up? I think I even put, unfortunately, something got in my screenshot on my slides, it seems like. So you can't really see what the first part should be, but let's type that first part, which is just import statements, really. So it's going to be, I'm just going to copy it over to here. And we're going to save this. Maybe I'll save this as demo so that we can all see the demo live. But yeah, so first we're just going to start off with importing these, and I know I actually put a little bit more. I put this GUI module as well. I hope that's okay with you all. It doesn't be too much. But yeah, so this will be the start of the way we start it, and then we'll write a function, and we're going to call it build message. Okay. And this build message function is going to, it's going to be the key element of the task block. Okay, it's the actual task that we're doing is constructing this message. So we're going to use the def keyword to define a function in Python, and we're going to type in build message, just like the slideshow said. And we're going to add a parameter to this function. A parameter, I'm going to type that in the chat, parameter. This is something that goes into the function as an input. And when it's a parameter like this, we can name the parameter. So I named it name, which is kind of confusing, but I just mean that could be the name of the person giving the instruction, the user. And we can further specify a data type such that this function will not be called unless the data type is appropriate. So in this case, we want the name to be in the string format so that we can return a message of greeting. So let's just return the hello string. And I used this F keyword to indicate that I'm going to format this string, and I'm going to add a name into the string, inserting that directly into the string to give a custom idea there. And yes, thank you, Emacs, for helping your lack of skill there with this. That's really helpful. I love how our community is looking out for each other, helping each other learn. That's one of the best things about these live workshops is the help that you can get from the community, not even the instructor, but yeah, so thank you all for that. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is configure the data nodes. So if you remember that the data nodes are inputs and outputs, they're really values that we're going to process in our program. So let's go ahead and type in the name. I'm gonna give this first one a name, input name data node CFG, to indicate that it's a config. And we're going to use the config module, and we're going to call the configure data node method and give a keyword argument, ID input name. So each of these data nodes is going to actually have its own ID, and that makes it super easy for us to identify them and use them in the tasks, right? So now I want to add another data node. So I already added my input name, and I want to add an output. So I'm going to do the message data node CFG. So in this one, I'm going to use the exact same method, but I'm just going to pass another ID, which will be message. Okay. So now we've built two different data nodes. And these data nodes can take on values. They can be assigned values. We can write some data to them. We can read some data from them. They're really acting kind of like a state. If you've ever used React before, or in other words, an object, if you're more familiar with object-oriented programming, it could have attributes and its own sort of methods associated with it. But that's sort of a little bit less of an analogy, but we do have these nodes, and then we also want to make sure that we configure the task. Okay, so the task is the nodes plus a function. So we're gonna build this task, build MSG task CFG. So we're just configuring for now. But we could type config.configure task. And this is going to accept several arguments. The first argument is going to just be the ID for the task. So even tasks will need an ID so we can keep track of them. And then, yes, Surfenia Berger said, will you be adding the code? We actually did share the code in the chat, but it probably has disappeared by now. So let me share it again so that everybody can see it. I just sent it in a Google Drive link. Just pasted it again. It's the completed version. So don't worry about following along with this code if it's too much for you to follow. Let me drop this down to a little bit. This is a little bit annoying. All right. So now we need to move on, and we're going to add a second argument, which will be the function build message. So that's telling the Taipy what the function is associated with this task. And now we'll add in our nodes. So we have input name data node. That's our input node. It's specifying where the arguments of the function should come from. It should be the same data format as the parameters specified. So we have one string here, and the input name will also be one string element. And then we'll specify the message data node too. So that will be the output. Okay. All right. So we've done everything now. We've done everything in this first slide that I showed. We've configured our Taipy scenario. So now I want to actually stop for a second before we continue and see if anybody has a question, since this is a lot of code right here. And remember, this code is available online too. So if you got stuck or you couldn't follow along with the live demo, please feel free to check the code online and make sure that it's there. So Kyle says, why did you use the config method and when do we use that method? Great question. So config is really drawing up this scenario. You need to draw it up first and then you can build it. So it's kind of like the difference between writing code and compiling code. It's a lot easier for us to think about configuring a workflow pipeline than it is for us to actually build ourselves all of these routes and interfaces between the different components. So that's why we simplify things into tasks and nodes. So that's why we use these configs. We've built an input and a message and also a task that will build us a hello world. Okay. Emacs Lad said, please, could you go over what exactly a node and a task is? So I think it'll make a lot more sense later when we get into the future of this, but let me go back 2 slides, and this answers Game GB3's question of what exactly are you building. 2, we're building a function that will, or actually a web app that will accept a name value, which is a node, pass it into a build message task, and then output the message to the message node. And the message will just be hello and then whatever the name is. So it's a hello world program for Taipy. And the nodes are where the data is stored, and the task is what operates on this data and manipulates it. So that's how the hello world pipeline is set up, to answer Game GB3's question. And you can see we've configured it right here. So we haven't actually set up any of the runtime scenario yet. We've just drawn it up, configured it, so to speak, and put all of our pieces together. So next, we're going to actually run this. All right, so let's get this code built up. So we're going to start with configuring a simple Taipy scenario. And I've put a lot of comments here, which obscures the code itself. So let's just actually focus on doing this, okay? We have in our program already configured stuff. So what we need to do now is move to the bottom here, and we're going to build the scenario, okay? So I want to first specify a condition. This is optional, actually, this condition. But the condition is going to be if double underscore name equals main, also with double underscores. This is specifying, is this file the main file in the project? Because if it's not, then we probably don't want it to run as though it is. And so this is just protecting us from accidentally running code that is not supposed to run at the right time, or on, when this file is not the main file. But we're going to instantiate a core service. So this is a service that is native to Taipy, and core is going to it's going to help us build the scenario and actually be able to run it. So we type .run to run the core. It'll create the parameters, environmental variables required for this to work. And then we're going to build the scenario. Okay, so what we do is we're going to name a scenario. So I'm just going to call it new scenario, since I used hello scenario before. in my example code. Maybe I'll use hello scenario again. I guess it doesn't matter whether we use the same name or not, but we're going to use we're going to use TP Taipy dot create scenario. So we're using this create scenario method, and we're going to pass a few arguments here, but they're all bottled up in the scenario.cfg. Oh, excuse me. Oh, that's okay. The scenario.cfg file, I'm sorry, variable. We're going to build that soon. We haven't built it yet. And then we will type hello scenario, and we're going to write to the input name node. So this gets a little bit at the question, what's the difference between a node and a task? Nodes are going to be giving some value. They're going to be given some value. So input name, we could actually write the value Stephen, which is my name. We could write that into the file. Okay, so that's super cool. And now we're going to add another input here. I'm sorry, we're going to submit this because we don't have any other inputs. And then we will print out the result, which is going to be stored in the message node. So we can read that node and see what we'll get. And we're using the ID to locate that, right? We're using this ID message to get that. All right. And it says let's test, but I actually think I need to do one last thing that I'm missing here. Which is that I need to configure the scenario. So I'm just going to copy this over because I think I forgot about this in my screenshots. But just to show you, scenario CFG is going to be where we put together the tasks into a single scenario object. Okay. So you can copy that over from the old version. I'll just also leave it up here for a minute for you to copy down. But basically, configure scenario takes two arguments, the ID and the task configurations that are passed into it. In this case, we only have one. All right, so we can run this now. We have a full entire setup here. And let's type the triangle here to run it. So you see it runs in my environment. We get all of this stuff compiling and warnings going off and all sorts of stuff like that. But you see at the end, we get this hello Stephen output, right? Because we asked Taipy to print to the console, and then what it printed was the message, which is returned by the build message function. So we got hello Stephen to print there. And if I wanted to, I could change what we write to the input name node. I could change it to Joe. I don't know. Maybe we have a Joe in the audience. I don't know. But then it says hello Joe. Right? Or we could say Maria. That would be fine. And we get Maria. All right. So you can write anything you want as long as it's a string, and that will be totally fine for the program. All right. And I've also written that in the slides too. So I said, let's test. If you type the run button, you should get this to work. And hopefully you all were able to get this working and get your environment configured in Taipy. But if not, just remember, once again, that code is available online. All right. But actually, really, I want to test. Let's test for real. Even though I said let's test the code, and now I want to test you. So here's a new form. This is going to be our quiz number 3. We're going to test you on your Taipy knowledge. Okay. See if you're paying attention. Nishan says, where can I see the code? I'll send it one more time in the chat. It's at a Google Drive link. So here's the link. And if you visit that link, you'll get access to the code, the entire workshop's working example. So that should work on your computer, on your personal computer. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to really think through this test here. All right, let's see some questions here. So I see from your lack of skill, once Taipy is downloaded, is there anything other that I need to run on the console? No, there shouldn't be. Yes, I agree with this. Camilo says you should type pip show Taipy, and it should be able to tell you. You can also type pip list. That's another key, and that should also run for you and tell you what's in your environment. And then when you click the play button, this one right here, it should bring you right there. All right, so hopefully that worked for you, your lack of skill, and just let me know if you are still having trouble. But we're going to actually go through the results of this quiz now. I got 4 responses, and they are looking great. So let's check those responses now. All right, so here they are. The first question was, name 2 elements that could compose a Taipy scenario. And you all got this right. Excellent job. Nodes and tasks are what compose a Taipy scenario. Views is very common in, a little common in React, but also mostly common in Flask, actually. You have what we call the view function. That's a basic building block of Flask. All right. And then consider the following code. List the arguments that are involved in the message. So we got quite a few here. ID is one of them, and then the object for the task, the config object for the first node, the config object for the second node. Exactly right. That's exactly right. And many of you wrote this as well. So excellent work on that. Then we asked, what does the following line of code accomplish, where hello scenario is a Taipy scenario object, and it's hello scenario.submit. So we did do this in our code, and we found that it actually builds the scenario. Okay, so before this code here, this configures it, right? So we have configure task. And I think I shared with you a VS Code, which shows how the configure scenario method is working. That's what configures the scenario, is configure scenario method. But this is a submit method. So it's actually what builds the scenario. Okay. So excellent work, everybody, with this. And we're going to actually now take a break just for 5 minutes while we go get something to drink. I might grab a little bit more water. I'm running low on my water. You know, you need a lot of water actually when you come up here and talk, because it definitely, you need your vocal cords to stay. I have another 3 workshops and some other mini events that I'm going to be working on this Global Hack Week. So I'm going to need all the water I can get. But we're going to take about a 5-minute break, and then we're going to move on to graphical interface. So these are some new concepts in Taipy that will help us, instead of doing things in the command line where we're saying hello Stephen, hello Maria in the command line, we're now going to see those things presented on a web app where the user can provide inputs. So that's what we'll do at the end of the break, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. So I'm just going to type in the chat, see you in 5 minutes, so that everybody knows when 5 minutes starts. All right, see you all in just a little bit. Hey there, everybody. I hope you had a good break and welcome back for the stream. So now we're going to be moving on to graphical interface. And this is the section of the stream where we're going to really dive into some things that are relevant to data visualization, building graphical elements and presenting them on the front end. So we're going to get into the fundamentals for this stream. And then next stream, we're actually going to apply that to a machine learning generated data visualization. So we'll get into that soon. But I want to now talk about this GUI module, which we actually already imported because I used some example code. But this GUI module we haven't used yet, and it contains all of the functionality needed for GUI development. We'll also define a page variable, which is a key layout element for the front end. It could be in Markdown, HTML, or Python. In this case, we're going to be using, basically what this is Markdown. But you could use it to lay out the user interface. So in this case, we're going to use triple quotes. Triple quotes is going to allow us to write a multi-line string, which is how we're going to develop this Markdown file using a multi-line string. So I'm just going to put that in my code. I can scroll into this section here where I have after my scenario and actually define the page variable. So I'm going to put that in. And first I'll write name. And we put this element here, which will have input name as the ID. Input really specifying that this is going to be some field that we can fill with values. And then I will put the submit button. Oh, sorry, I wasn't sharing my screen. Thank you, defendant 312511. But yeah, now we're going to actually submit. So sorry about that. Sorry about not. Sometimes I do not share my screen, even though I mean to. It's just unfortunately happens in the online live world. Every once in a while, you're bound to have some kind of issue. But then I'm going to put this submit tag underneath it. So this is going to be a button, and it will be triggered by it will trigger some function. And the function it's going to trigger is submit scenario. We haven't written this function yet, but we will. And that'll happen whenever the user clicks the button. And it will actually take as an argument this input name value, which we specify, or the user could specify. And then return as its output message, which will be displayed at the bottom. Okay. So that's sort of how this page variable works. And I'm going to show you more specifically how this looks. So I just broke this down a little bit for you, that the variable is variable name, and then type is pointed to in these blue arrows, input or button. And there are actually quite a few types, and you can look at them all on the documentation for Taipy. But I want to actually now talk about how to instantiate these variables before we have the user do them, so that we can have something to display at first. So I'm going to write input name. I'm just using Adam Smith. You can use whoever you want. I don't know why I chose Adam Smith, actually, but it just was on the brain, I guess. And then we'll have another default, which will be the message. And I'm actually just going to put the default message as empty, because I don't really want to display a message until the user hits submit. I think that would kind of ruin the fun of the message. So just keep that as empty for now. All right, so we've sort of now gone through this layout as much as we could. And now we're going to abstract the submit functionality through a callback. So this is that submit scenario function that I mentioned earlier that's triggered by the submit button. And this callback is going to actually abstract the process of building the scenario such that the scenario gets rebuilt every time that we have a change to the state, every time that the button is triggered, and that change of the state, which is specific to the user, will then influence what we display. So I've written up this here, but I'm going to code it up live for you in the scenario. And remember, we're going to have to define this as its own thing. So we have submit scenario as the name of the function, and it's going to accept state as the parameter. And the parameter state is, once again, specific to every user. So many users could log on to your web app, and they will each have a different state associated with their session, so that one user doesn't type in their name and hit submit, and that gets sent to some other random person. That will never happen because of this. And so Kyle says, the triple quote is used for multi-line in Python? Yes, it is, for a multi-line string. So we'll type scenario.input name, which indicates we want that input name attribute. And then we'll write the state input name. So we're writing the current user state of the input name field into the scenario, and then we're going to build it. Okay. And so then finally, I want to make sure that we have this message read back out to the state. So we type state.message, and then we'll type scenario message. So scenario is where we're getting this information processed on so to speak, the back end. And then, state is really the user-facing client-side information. All right, but it's very abstracted because of Taipy and their framework, which makes it a lot simpler to deal with. Okay, so now we're going to rebuild the scenario. We want to be adjusting this what is inside the name equals main section so that it only triggers this function, really. And so we're going to have a scenario object, and that will replace our previous scenario code, which was all fixed and not abstracted at all. And then we'll have another line that says GUI, and I'm going to type this out live, GUI page. So we're going to pass the page layout to the GUI so it knows what to build and where. And then we're going to run that. And this is going to actually build us the user interface, a graphical user interface that we didn't have with our previous example. So let's try running this. If I know live demos, this isn't going to work. All right, so it says we have a syntax error on line 1. I wonder where that syntax error could be. Oh, it's not on line 1. It's I think it's, maybe I just need to delete this session. Okay, actually we didn't have an error, which is great. Oh, but it ran the wrong thing. Weird. Okay. I'm not sure why this isn't working, but luckily, okay, let's just close all of our sessions. We'll rerun this. It's still not working for me, but I did take screenshots of what it's supposed to look like. So that's a good thing. and you can actually see what it looks like. But you should see the following. And let me know if this is working for you. I think the reason it's not working for me, I think, is because I have too many localhost sessions, but I'm not sure why. It should be compiling. But what you should see is this message field blank, Adam Smith in the input as default, and a submit button, so that when you type in any name, it should pop up, and then you click submit, and the message will pop up. Right. So I typed this in with my name, hit submit, and I got the name. So Camilla says it is working for me. That's great. I'm glad it's working for you. I'm not sure why it's not working for you, but I'll look into that after the workshop. And now it's time for the true test. I know. I'm sorry for giving you so many quizzes, but I want to give you these because I think they'll really help you solidify those knowledges. But this one's actually a verbal quiz, so I want you to just message out in the chat, and I want you to tell me. Could you tell me, why did we use these triple quotes? Could anybody tell me why we used those triple quotes? So the triple quotes were when we did page, and we used triple quotes to start it off. I actually answered it already. And Sean says block comments. It's not quite a block comment. A block comment, we actually don't have block comments in Python. We have inline comments. There's no way to create a block comment. Your lack of skill is correct. It's a block string. Yes, and there's a little bit of a difference between a block string and a block comment. A block comment would be completely ignored by the development environment in all circumstances. So in other words, it would be irrelevant what we wrote for the page layout, but it's actually a block string. So people will use these as comments because they don't get displayed anywhere or stored anywhere if you just write them into your file. But it really actually has some meaning. It has a value. It takes on the value of the string. So yes, you can use multiple lines, and in this example, we're using Markdown. So excellent work, everybody. And so I'm actually not going to do a break because we already took a break. I don't know why I put in a second break here, just 15 minutes later, 10 minutes later. But we're going to move on to our challenge. So I want you to add another control to this project. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to just go through the documentation here. I want you to look through and try for yourself to implement another control. The controls we've already implemented are text, input, and button. So all I'm asking you to do is add a new one to your layout. Okay, I don't want you to actually implement any functionality. We're going to do that on our in this example that I have here. So don't worry about doing that on your own. But how about I give you 5 minutes to really look at this? All right, everybody. I hope that you were able to play around with these controls a little bit during that brief focus period. But now we're going to actually implement one on our own, and we're going to implement my idea. We're not going to implement your idea. We're going to implement my idea. You can implement your idea on, after the workshop. That's fine. But this time, just to keep it consistent, we're going to implement my idea. So the idea I had was to add a formality toggle switch. So this application says hello to the user, right? But what if the user wants to be greeted in a more formal way or a less formal way? So we're going to add a toggle control. And the way we do that is by changing the UI layout. So we're just going to add below this formality toggle. And then, once we're done with that, forgot that we're going to have this new variable formality. So that's what's highlighted in this curly brace. And then in the second pipe here, in between the second pipes, is the toggle keyword, and that's going to indicate we're using a toggle control. So if you remember this list that I sent you, toggle is one of the controls. And then I gave it two values. So according to the documentation, the way you add values in a toggle is using LOV equals, and then you can add different options to the toggle separated by semicolons. So I added two toggle options, yes or no. So we're either going to get a formality indicator or not. Okay. So now we need to update the configuration as well. So we need to add an input node that is going to be for formality. And so before we had our name input, so now we're going to have input formality data node. Actually, you can just call it formality data node if you want to be consistent, since formality is what I identified the node as. But it really doesn't matter what you name this node. You just need to then write config.configure data node, and then in the arguments we'll pass ID equals formality. All right, so that's sort of the idea there. And notice that everything else is staying the same, right? So we're keeping input name the same, and we're keeping our message the same. Let me actually write this out live in my code editor so that everyone can sort of see. So I'm gonna change things around a little bit here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is edit my page. So when you edit page and you're using Markdown like this, and you can actually just treat it almost like it's what's really displayed on the site. So I'm just going to add a space here to keep some space in between message and formality, right? So this is really going to display this formality text. And then I'm adding this tag here, and I'm going to put formality. This is a new variable that we're going to define. And this is a toggle. So it's a toggle type. Oops. Sorry about that. And then, as I mentioned, we'll add LOV. So we'll have yes and no. And don't forget to put a pipe at the end. If you don't put a pipe at the end of the tag, then it just won't work. It'll give you a compile error. And then we don't want that. And remember that you need to now update your data nodes. So I'm actually going to call it the formality. I'm going to take my own advice here and rename it formality data node CFG, because I want to keep it consistent with everything else. So we type config, and the method is configure data node, and the ID is formality, so that it can be identified and distinguished between the other nodes. Okay, so those are my data nodes, and now we need to actually update the configure task as well. So that's the next step here. Oh, I guess I wrote to update the build message function next, but we'll update the task as well. But we need to update this build message function, and it needs to incorporate this formality in some way. So I'm gonna make a new parameter here, formal, and it should also be of the string type, because if you remember from our layout, the formality toggle will have yes or no options. And I'm going to make a conditional statement. So if formal is yes, so this means that the formal is going to be indicated, formal language is indicated. Then we want to return greetings. And I'll put the name there, right? And else, if formal is not toggled on, if it's no, you could also write if formal equals no, but I'll just write else. We could return hey there, name. Maybe an exclamation mark is too informal for the formal setting. So I'll just use a period for that sentence. But now you can see how this additional formal flag will toggle the response. So we'll get a formal response and an informal response. All right. So next slide, we're going to update the task. This is what I really was mentioning before. And we need to include this other node in the task because it relies on formality data node in order to get that second argument. So let's go into Visual Studio Code and update our configure task. So we're going to, instead of passing just one node here, we're going to actually create a list of nodes. And the second one here is going to be our formality data node, CFG. So now when the scenario gets built, the task will be connected to both nodes and it can rely on information from both. All right. Okay, so that concludes configure task. And now we can update the scenario build and submit. So I'm going to do that live as well. So you can see there that we're going to update the submit scenario function in order to accomplish this. And I'll scroll down to that submit scenario function. And remember that we always need to be writing the user state to our scenario before we build that. So instead of just having input name right, we're going to now have another one, which will be formality. Remember, this is the ID of the node. We're going to write the state of formality onto that scenario before we submit. And then the state message can be the same because we're going to read the message out from that build message function, and it's going to be totally updated now to reflect the new formality function. So we don't need to really change too much about that. All right. So we've implemented this now, and I want you to try again, and you can see what we get here. I just gave an example here from the Adam Smith example, but if you select the no formality, then it will tell you, hey there, Adam Smith. But then if you select yes, it would tell you a much more formal response. All right, so that's the idea there. And I want you now to complete this wrap up. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on this wrap up. It has some quiz questions and also some feedback questions. I'd love to know how you thought of the workshop, whether you learned anything new. That would be great to hear from all of you. So I'm going to give a few minutes to figure this out. But yeah, so does anybody have any questions about what we've done here? I see Ajax over here, actually. Hello. Good to see you. Some longtime users in the chat. And we also have some new faces that I haven't seen before. So welcome to you as well. If you are new to the community, new to the stream. But yeah, this Taipy tutorial product, this is the final product that I mentioned I would share with you all. And in fact, I did already share it with you in the chat, but I'm going to share it one last time. And if you go to this link, what you'll find is the fully completed Python file. So I'm just gonna show that now actually while we're waiting for any questions that might appear. But the idea with this was to share it so that anybody could follow along. And I've commented it all as well, so that you can see exactly what everything is referring to. But just to review here, right? We imported all of these modules so that you would be able to work with Taipy. And then we wrote this function, right? Which was build message function. It's part of the task element in Taipy. And we added 2 arguments here, name and formal. And formal was allowing us to toggle between 2 possible responses, while name was customizing the response. And we used data nodes to store the states of these different variables. We had an input name data node and a formality data node. We used ID to label those. And then we had a message data node that was the output of the scenario. So then we configured the task where we had input and output nodes that must have been specified in addition to the function. And so we had build message was the ID of this task, the function build message, and then we had a list of inputs and 1 output node as well. We configured the scenario, and that was allowing us to sort of compose the tasks plus the nodes into one scenario. And then we had our front end development here where we instantiated all these variables, defined them in a layout using Markdown. We abstracted our build process using the submit scenario function and made it depend on the state, which is really a user given thing. And it will allow us to write into there. And then we read out the message from the state we read out the message from the scenario back into the state. So it would update on the front end once we were done with our build message function. And finally, in the very last portion here, we built the scenario, we ran the core services, created that scenario, and using this submit scenario function, we would build over and over again interactively, and then we ran the GUI. Instead of prescribing the functionality ahead of time like we did at the first half of the workshop, we actually ran a GUI so that the user could interact with the scenario and edit that as they wanted to. Emacs Lad said, can there be a list of multiple input-output nodes in the configure task method? Good question. So I think we actually, if we scroll up to the configure task, where is that? I actually did submit multiple input nodes. And indeed, a function can accept multiple arguments. So we would have a task function. So I'm just writing in the chat here, but it would have argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. And then we could ask it to return output 1, output 2, output 3. Okay, so this could be our theoretical task function. And if that were our task function, then when we do configure task, we need to make a list of input nodes that has 3 and a list of output nodes that has 3, right? So it's totally possible to do that. And you just need to make sure the list matches up with what the task function is accepting and returning. All right. And your lack of skill says, what were the 3 things we needed to install from pip in the beginning? So the main 3 things that we installed there were pip install Torch, Transformers, and Taipy, as Kyle mentioned. Thank you. I was just about to type that in the comments, but thank you for mentioning that. Our community, very helpful. All right, so why don't we take a look at this quiz now? Now that we've gone through a little bit of this, we had one response to the quiz. Excellent. So at least you know who you are if you were the one who responded. So excellent job with this quiz. Person who responded, he said, to bring your Python object projects to the web. One thing you learned from the workshop, the triple quote, which allows an entire block to be a string block. Yeah, that's right. It's a great thing to have. And remember to stick around for the next edition of the Taipy workshop. We're going to actually go in even deeper and try to visualize some data and even work with a machine learning model. So that's going to be done on Sunday. So here's the link for the Sunday workshop, and please register. So if you register, then you're gonna actually be able to. Oh, sorry everybody, I forgot to give you the quiz link. But if you want to fill it out, I promise I'll read them at the next part of the workshop. But yeah, just remember to register for that if you want a calendar invite, some kind of notification that it will go live. But Camilla says, no questions from me. Thank you for showing the new framework. No problem, Camillo. Yeah, Taipy is one of our partners now in this season of Major League Hacking. So I thought I would just do a workshop because I noticed a lot of hackers using them at our hackathon. I went to a hackathon in Texas recently, actually. And I noticed a lot of folks using and wanting to use Taipy. So I figured it would be good to do some sort of workshop where I introduce you all to the basics so you can get started using it right away. Gal said Taipy is used for front end and back end. Yes, you can actually use Taipy for both. They have a ton of learning resources on their website for that. And as you can see from what we did today, we built an extremely simple application, but it did have a front end and a back end. So, that's kind of cool. Although both are on the client side, but we'll continue to expand our knowledge of Taipy. All right, and a few more things you learned from the workshop. Thank you for sharing, everybody. I've learned the basics of Python. That's awesome. What about Taipy is, and yeah, it's super important to have a UI for the data you're analyzing, right? So this is just one of many options you have. There's plenty of other options. There's Flask. You could use a more advanced thing. Is there a drop-down UI element? Yes, there is. So just check out that controls link I sent. I'll send it again so you can really check this out. But all of them are pretty much the same level of difficulty in terms of using them. They're all pretty much on the same level as what we've done already. So yeah, feel free to check those out. But there is a drop-down. But yeah, thank you, Pharaoh, for joining. And thank you to everybody, really, for sticking around. And I hope to see you on Sunday when we will have our second part of the workshop. Yes, it will be Super Bowl Sunday, actually, here in the United States. But I don't think our workshop contradicts with the game. Although maybe the very beginning of the game. Let's see. I'm going to Google it right now. I want to see. Yeah, so we will miss the first hour and a half of the game. But you know what? That is pretty much, to me, one of the most boring parts, because it's all of the commentary. Oh, introduce everybody in the stadium, and we'll figure out how are we going to set everything up, and so we'll catch the second half. And the African Cup of Nations finals. That's very cool. I did not know that. Let's see when the African Cup of Nations finals are. I'm trying to see what time it starts. I know it starts on the 11th. Thank you for pointing that out. But for some reason I can't find the exact time. But I hope it's not during our workshop. Yeah, exactly. Second monitor. Grab a second monitor. Why not? How about 3 monitors? One for Global Hack Week, one for the Super Bowl, and one for the African Cup of Nations final. You can watch everything, and I'm sure this is the most exciting between the 3. But anyway, thank you all for joining. I'm going to cut it here, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm super available on LinkedIn and in the Discord. So yeah, feel free to send me a chat. All right, everybody, take care until next time.